So in the last few weeks, off season, like I said, done a lot of planning for 2022, but also reflecting on this year and all the races I've done and all the experiences I've had, what I've learned, and what I want to take forward for next year. So the season started all the way back in Texas 70.3. That was in April, and I was coming into that race coming off of a lot of lockdowns and kind of swim inconsistency. For the last week before that race, there were no pools, so I had to swim in. A friend of mine let me use his endless pool, and I really just focused on keeping good form and keeping my muscles kind of acclimatized to swimming. So unsure how that would go, but that was actually a fantastic swim. I came out of the water something around 40 to 45 seconds behind the leader, which is Ben Canoe, in a non-wetsuit swim. So that was really good for me. Got onto the bike, was right where I needed to be, about the 15 to 20K mark. I was right with Matt Hansen and Lionel Sanders. And then unfortunately got a flat. There's some pretty rough roads there, and that was the first time running tubeless, but I picked a tire that was just too thin for that course, didn't have puncture protection. Was able to get a neutral wheel after 4 minutes or so, and then that wheel was like a really slow wheel, so I lost a bunch more time. Ended up coming off in 20-something off the bike, but I ran very, very well. I believe it was the second fastest run, just behind Matt Hansen there, and worked my way up to somewhere around 10th. So did gain some confidence from that run. It was a 110 and change. So that was really good, and I knew that if I had just kept it together on the bike and not obviously out in the flat, I would have been great in that race. So I gained confidence there. Then I went to Florida. That race was only a week later. And I kind of I did some decent hard training in between, because I knew that the main focus was coming in another 3 weeks was the regional championship, St. George. So I did some decent training on the Tuesday and Wednesday, and then that race was Sunday. And that race went fairly well, had a good swim. The group kind of got messed up with navigating and was behind the lead kayak, led them astray, and I kind of stayed on course. So I actually got out of the water, ended up second out of the water there. Had a good bike, really solid power for me, came off rating contention, kind of in the top 6 or 7. Ran pretty well the first lap, and then just kind of fell apart. It was pretty hot, and that training I did that week kind of took a little bit out of me for that second half of the run. So that was a bit of a gamble. Didn't necessarily pay off for Florida. I ended up 4th, but I knew that it would do me well for St. George, which was the next race. So between those two, I went and stayed with Matt Hansen, did an altitude camp with him there in Castle Rock, Colorado. He was awesome to stay with, train with. He trains really hard. Like, it's no surprise that he's had some great results. And then we went to the North American Champs there in St. George, and I knew that would be a good day for me. I definitely responded well to the altitude, had another really good swim, came out of the water, kind of right where I needed to be, like not too far from that lead group. Hit the first part of that bike really hard, and then ended up catching that lead group, staying kind of with those guys until the end of that bike, and had a pretty good run. I did lose my main nutrition bottle on a bump during that bike ride, so I was a little short on calories. That worried me a bit, so I had to stop at some aid stations to get extra calories, and that kind of caused me to lose the group right towards the end of the bike. Just the first few guys got away a bit, but I was still in great position. And then had an okay run, but just didn't quite feel like I had my best run. Ran something around a 113 and ended up coming in 5th. I was running down Rudy Von Berg and Magnus Ditlev, but ran out of space. So came 5th, but I wasn't too far behind the leaders. So that was a really big day for me, because it kind of showed me that I'm right there and I can compete in those championship races. And then I'm really, really close to where I wanted to be. So I got a lot of points, PTO points for that race, and it kind of jumped me way up in the rankings. And then all of a sudden I was able to think about qualifying for Collins Cup, even though that hadn't even crossed my mind at that point. So it kind of brought me up to this next level where I thought I could compete on the world stage. So that was my first race block. And then I ended up and took a little bit of a break, built my training back up. And then I had another 3 races. So I did Des Moines 70.3. That one had a shortened bike. Pretty good day, but kind of bad swim. Ended up a little too far back. Got off the bike. kind of in the top 8, ran my way into 3rd, but I definitely wanted more time on that bike course because it was shortened due to weather. Really lucky we even got to race though, to be honest. So I was happy to kind of come away with my first podium of the year there. Then the next weekend, Rev 3 Williamsburg. That was a really good battle with Andrew Starkowicz. Big group swam together. It was a downstream swim. Kind of all got out within shouting distance of each other. And then it was a bike versus run, and Starkey took off, as he does on the bike, and had an incredible ride. And I rode very well for myself too. I believe I averaged 303 watts for that 90K, which is the most I've ever done for average power. And he outbiked me by 6.5 minutes. So unbelievable how he rode there. And I had the second fastest bike by a fair margin as well. So it was something around that 6 minutes 45 gap getting off the bike. And I brought back a lot of that in the first half of the run, and then, started to feel it. It was hot. I decelerated just a bit and ended up about 30 seconds short of catching him. So really, really wanting to have another crack at him for sure. We'll see if they have that race next year. Maybe I can try again. Then I went to Ecuador, 70.3, where I trained in Ecuador for a couple weeks before, got some altitude training, which was great. That was a team race where a lot of the RTS group went, and we had a really good setup there. Thanks to Flacca for kind of hooking us up with everything we needed there. And came down from altitude for the race in Manta, and it looked like this was a really good chance for me to get a win. I was probably the favorite looking on the start list. Nick was also there, and he was, one of the stronger guys for sure. And we swam with the lead group. There was one guy up the front in that ocean swim, getting stung by sea lice the whole time, by the way. But that was kind of you don't really notice it too much when you're going pretty hard. But started the bike. Nick and I went out really, really hard. We wanted to drop this group because there was a ton of guys, and we were able to do that. And the two of us got away and used the first lap to catch back up to that leader. I believe it was Matute from Ecuador who was leading. Very good swimmer, an ITU athlete. And then those next 2 laps, we just tried to distance ourselves from the field. Some guys kind of caught back up a little bit, and then we pulled away again in the last lap. And really, I was just trying not to crash because it was a pretty technical course, and I knew if I was able to get off the bike, I'd have a good chance of winning on the run. So Nick and I did get off the bike, just me and him in the lead. And I had a great run, nice flat course. The camera there, they had like live TV for it, and I was kind of had the camera with me all the time, and that was cool. And ran really well, ran 112 on that course, and ended up getting the win. And my main goal for that race was obviously to get a win, but also to get myself some points to get into that Collins Cup. And I did get points, and I moved myself up the rankings, and I ended up getting that selection for Collins Cup, which was a huge turning point again, and built my confidence a lot for the season to know that I was there competing with the best. So then the next was Collins Cup. I took a break again after Ecuador, and I think that was another good lesson for me this year, was like taking those breaks mid-season to let the body recover. It pays off in the late season. Because I took a good break. That was the second time for a week, and then built back up. And then Collins Cup was in late August, and I was really strong for that race. That was an amazing experience there, and most people, you guys probably saw the race, but lots of good footage from it. I had a really good day across the board, pretty much swim, bike, and run, and ended up kind of in a battle with Joe Skipper in the last. On the run, I had basically 2 minutes to catch him, and that's what he had built up on his lead on the bike, and ended up catching him with about a mile to go and getting the win on match 12. So that was an awesome day, and hope to get back there next year because that was a huge highlight for me of the season. So great race there, and then I had a few weeks to build up for Worlds, and I knew that the altitude had worked well for me in the past in the year. Both times I went to altitude, I had a great race right after. So Nick and I and Leslie went up to Beaver, Utah. We went up pretty high up the mountain. We stayed at about, it's like 2,900 meters elevation. So really high up there, and used that altitude to our advantage. trained a little bit lower, down more around 2,000 meters, and just had a good 2-week focus there for Worlds where kind of didn't focus on too much other than training. So got some great biking and running there. The riding was fantastic. It was always having to climb that hill and build that strength up. I had a really big gear. I didn't really have easy hill gearing, but I ended up grinding a lot and building a lot of strength, I think, in that block, as well as fitness with that high elevation. So then we went to Worlds. It was just an easy drive for us then, a couple hours down to St. George, and I stayed with Nick. And I knew that the tactics at Worlds would be similar to how it was at the regional champs. It's just that much harder because you've got even stronger field and even more aggressive racing. So that's exactly how it went. The swim, there was a lead group of 6 and they got away, and then there was a second group and I was right in the middle of that group, which was a great swim for me. And they were about a minute ahead, and I really had to go hard that first 30 minutes or so to get in there. Gustav Eden, Magnus Ditlev, and Fred Funk were also in that second group with me, and they bridged up. They bridged up quicker than I did, and I couldn't quite stay with them, so it was very, very hard for me to get in there kind of on my own. But I managed to do that, and then it was just a matter of surviving that bike, and that was really tough. A lot of big surges on that bike ride. So it was more of just like any championship race, it was more high-end sprinting than anything. Like, I spent a lot of time above 400 watts just trying to get over the top of those climbs in good position, and then sometimes you're coasting because you're going on a downhill and the group kind of momentum just takes you. So really hard bike, and I didn't know if my legs would respond on the run. A group of 3 had gotten away late in the bike, and then it was 4th through about 10th were all together, and I was in that group. I kind of led that group into transition. So got onto the run and actually had some pretty good legs, and this was my goal race for the year, so I knew I had to go for it to get with that group, and even if I blew up on the run, that would be fine. But I actually managed to keep it together and ran pretty well. Was in 4th for quite a while, and then Mickey Tagold actually went by me in the last couple K, and I just couldn't respond after all those really hard downhills running. So finished 5th. Awesome race. I was super stoked about it, but right away I knew that for next year I need to work on my downhill running to be able to compete to potentially get on the podium, because I was only a minute down from 3rd, and that's my goal for 2022 is a top 3 at that race. So that was awesome, and it capped off the season and took the pressure off, and then I went to Spain and just added on the Ironman to see how it went. So I already talked about that one, but that was my year. I learned a lot. I gained a ton of confidence for being able to compete with the best. I was up as high as 10th in the PTO World Rankings at one point, and ended up, and I'm now sitting in 12th. But can't wait to use those lessons I learned and build on that for next year, which will be the next video, how I plan to race in 2022. But a few of those I'll be going back for sure, but the schedule's already looking quite a bit different, so we're going to have to make some changes and make a good plan and stick to it. And that's kind of what got me a really great season, is planning my season well, periodizing my training to do well, specifically at the end of the year, but also within each race block, and then separating those race blocks with a little bit of rest. So hopefully I'll be able to do the same next year. And yeah, thanks for watching, and hopefully you guys have been liking this new YouTube stuff. It's going to be more consistent. We're going to get a bunch of videos planned, and let me know what you want to see, and we'll make it happen. So until next time.